everybody. Thank you so much for attending my talk. Today I'll be talking about breeding site weather and non-breeding site habitat and how these affect the survival of an Arctic breeding shorebird species. So in shorebird conservation biology, we collect demographic data to monitor populations. And if a population seems to be declining, it might be important to ask ourselves when, where, or what might be driving these declines. For example, we can examine how shorebird populations respond to ecosystem changes in habitat availability and quality, predator abundance, or food resources. Of course, finding the answers to how shorebirds adjust to ecosystem changes is challenging, given that many species are highly mobile and use different places in the world at different times throughout the year. For many species, explicit factors influencing declines haven't been defined, especially considering both breeding and non-breeding ground influences. We can estimate different vital rates to help us better understand species population demography, and one metric of vital rates includes adult survival, which refers to the probability that an individual will survive from one period of time to the next once it has reached adulthood, and this is often measured annually. Consistently high adult survival rates are indicative of a healthy population, while declining rates may signal certain factors impacting the species' ability to persist over time. Emigration is also informative. So for shorebirds, survival rates are typically estimated using mark, capture, and recapture data. So by comparing the proportion of marked individuals from the first sample to the second sample, we can estimate population size and survival rates. So in this example, our survival rate is 100%. Yay. But what if individuals have dispersed away from the original study area? In this case, we do not know the site fidelity of the species, and we are underestimating survival if our survival estimation method does not account for this. Calidris alpina articula is one shorebird species with declining populations thought to be influenced by low adult survival rates. There are 10 subspecies of Dunlin, and Dunlin, like many migratory birds, use flyways, here displayed and labeled on this map, to travel to and from breeding and non-breeding areas. So each subspecies of Dunlin likes to use a specific flyway throughout the world. And Dunlin as a subspecies are Arctic or near Arctic breeding shorebirds. Articula Dunlin breed in northern Alaska and Canada from late May to late August. And in the non-breeding periods, they migrate using the East Asian Australasian Flyway to and from non-breeding areas along the Yellow Sea, Taiwan, North and South Korea, and Japan. The population is estimated between 200,000 and 750,000 individuals, and the adult survival rate is estimated between 0.41 and 0.60, which is relatively low when we compare it to other North American breeding subspecies. Yet our knowledge of what influences this lower survival rate is limited. There have been 2 prior studies estimating Dunlin adult survival, Articula adult survival. One used 7 years of mark capture recapture data from an Arctic study site to estimate apparent survival rates. This is noted as phi, and this does not account for that dispersal outside of the study area. And they estimated the differences in survival rates between female and male Dunlin. And the second used 4 years of data from multiple Arctic study sites to estimate a true survival, noted as S, for several Arctic breeding shorebirds, including Articula Dunlin, but also 2 other Dunlin subspecies. Here we can observe the differences between the 3 subspecies of Dunlin, all that use similar breeding habitat in the North American Arctic, yet 2 subspecies are exhibiting a much higher adult survival rate. So what is the difference between these subspecies? It is the flyways that they migrate along. So Articula Dunlin use the East Asian Australasian Flyway during the non-breeding periods, where other Arctic breeding Dunlin subspecies are using the American flyways. So this led us wonder what's going on in the East Asian Australasian Flyway that might potentially be impacting adult survival. The East Asian Australasian Flyway, EAAF, is a major flyway for migratory shorebirds, yet is experiencing fast shorebird population declines globally. In addition, some regions along the EAAF have lost 1.2% of intertidal habitat annually since 1980 due to climate change and human development. We wanted to understand if low estimated survival rates were related to undetected dispersal, lack of study duration or sample sizes, or if articulate Dunlin were experiencing persistent lower survival. This study is different from the prior studies as we used Dunlin capture, recapture, and resite data from a primary breeding site and resites from the Dunlin non-breeding range. We considered environmental and ecological factors from both breeding and non-breeding sites to see if any might estimate true annual adult survival, or might influence true annual adult survival. Our breeding site is located in the high Arctic, and Dunlin typically arrive to this breeding site and begin to initiate nests by early June. And the first part of field data collection includes searching for Dunlin nests when they arrive in the spring, where we attempt to capture and band them with a unique combination. And this allows us to identify Dunlin individually wherever they are resited. To control for potential effects of breeding site influences on survival, we collected breeding site-specific data constrained between June 1st and August 1st that we thought might relate to adult survival. And to refine the non-breeding range and account for dispersal, we used additional resite data collected along the migratory pathway and non-breeding grounds by volunteers. This is collected by volunteers that were resiting birds along the coast. So we were able to compile this resite data and create a refined non-breeding range map with the number of resites shown in circles here and the non-breeding range shaded and outlined. Because we expected intertidal habitat on the non-breeding grounds might influence survival, we used ArcGIS to create a tidal flat habitat variable. So we used the Global Intertidal Change app, to a program that uses satellite imagery to map the global distribution and change of intertidal areas within our non-breeding range map. So here is an example of what that looked like. Highlighted by the pink box here, we can expand that and see what that data looks like. And we were able to extract that and calculate annual intertidal extent values to use in our adult survival modeling. Through our supplementary resite data, we were able to observe birds that were still alive but had just emigrated outside of their original study area. So this helped us understand apparent survival and site fidelity so we could estimate a true survival rate using the Barker model framework. And within this framework, we considered candidate models of all possible additive combinations of these variables from the breeding site and the non-breeding sites, and we included sex and year to estimate adult survival. And we used AICC to rank all of our models. Here are some of our results. So across the study period from 2003 to 2021, we can see that female and male adult survival were similar. Males average 0.63 and females 0.60. And we can compare these results to prior studies that estimated articulate survival, which is indicated with the overlaid black lines. And we can see that articulate survival still remains lower than those other Arctic breeding subspecies, Hudsonia and Pacifica. We can also examine what kind of effect each variable had on adult survival through estimated beta coefficient values. On the left side is each variable with our expected relationship, positive or negative, on survival in the parentheses. And where the variable's coefficient value lies on the figure represents the relationship each variable had on adult survival in our model. So through analysis, we found precipitation and intertidal extent and sex to be the most important variables predicting survival. Yet precipitation and intertidal were the most informative, with sex just being marginally informative. We were most interested in exploring the relationship between non-breeding intertidal extent and adult survival. So I will be focusing on that for the remainder of this talk. So if we predict adult survival estimates based off of certain values of non-breeding intertidal extent, we observe a positive relationship with survival, which makes sense. Greater intertidal extent is correlated with higher adult survival. We found non-breeding intertidal extent along the East Asian, Austral, Asian flyway positively correlated, but we also observed a decrease in intertidal extent throughout the study period as well as a decrease or a decline in adult survival rates. And the relationship between intertidal loss and the declines in survival rates in this study imply that this subspecies is also vulnerable to this habitat loss. So intertidal areas have long been recognized as critical habitat for numerous shorebird species. And the East Asian Australasian flyway, again, is home to 50 million migratory water birds, but is experiencing fast declines in shorebird population, largely attributed to the loss of tidal flats and due to coastal development. And coastal developments can alter or remove essential habitat. So, for example, here we can see through satellite imagery how a major seawall construction built in South Korea, built in proximity to estuaries and encompassing intertidal areas, can alter and change coastal habitat through time, removing the intertidal mudflat habitat that is critical for shorebirds. So here we can zoom in on this and watch the development occur through time. So it's just filling in with all that sediment and removing all that habitat. And here's what that looks like as a finished project. This declining trend in adult survival, coupled with the loss of intertidal habitat throughout our study, poses significant conservation concerns for this subspecies, and it echoes calls for conservation effort along the East Asian Australasian flyway. If this pattern of habitat loss continues, we might observe further detriment to this subspecies. So establishing protected coastal and intertidal areas along non-breeding grounds is critical to this subspecies conservation, but also to the entirety of shorebird populations that use this flyway. And now that we have more information on specific non-breeding areas, perhaps we can start using tracking technology to parse out Dunlin non-breeding habitat use on a finer scale to help inform conservation strategies moving forward. That wraps up my talk. Thank you very much for attending, and I will be able to answer questions now, or you can also email me. Thank you very much.